what rigor is.
Rigorous instruction that requires students to, first thing, make meaning for themselves. Students have to be doing the thinking in order for it to be rigorous, and not just this controlled pseudo thinking that often happens in schools. It's about students making meaning and making meaning for themselves. The second piece is that students have to impose structure and information, because the way that we know our brains work, the act of imposing structure, the act of organizing information, actually deepens our understanding of the information. Third piece is that rigor requires students to take individual skills and put them together to create a process. If we don't show students how to take individual skills and start to put them together to create an entire process, we're cheating them of real thinking, because thinking is not disconnected skills. Thinking is about an entire process. And then the fourth thing is it requires students to apply what they've learned in new and novel situations. With this definition, now when someone says, hey, is this lesson plan rigorous? I can say, well, where in your lesson are students making meaning for themselves? Where are students imposing structure? So now all of a sudden, I've put a definition into the hands of the teacher.
So, our technical definition, according to the Glossary of Education, is rigor is instruction, learning, experiences, and educational expectations that are academically, intellectually, and personally challenging. Is there anything, would anybody like to add anything to that? It's pretty sufficient. Alright, so here are some quick ideas, and I'll just let you go ahead and read through these. What rigorous learning is and what rigorous learning is not. I think there's some common misconceptions as far as rigor. If we look at what rigorous learning is not, increased workloads, I know that a lot of times there is a misconception that if we give more work, then we're automatically making it more rigorous, when in fact that's not the case. Or difficult work, when really there's a difference between work being difficult and work being challenging. So just because the work is hard does not mean that students are being challenged. Rigorous instruction can be implemented in any grade level, from kinder and up, pre-K. It's not for only the elite, it's for everyone. Every student deserves to have challenge in their instruction. And then managing the learning process, I thought, was another really important component of rigor. Just being able to, kind of like what Dr. Brown was saying, put the learning in the hands of the kids, let them kind of do some exploration, which is a little bit more difficult, I feel like, for us in our setting, our traditional setting. It becomes a little more difficult. We used to be able to do a lot more with our flexible seating and Socratic seminars, and having that flexibility to kind of allow more student-centered. Here it's a little bit different, but we must increase rigor here as well. I thought this was a nice visual. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but it's just showing the different stages of thinking, starting with remembering. That's our lowest level. You know, they say the drill and kill and is just memorizing facts. It doesn't take any type of critical thinking. It's just rehearsing and memorizing. And then understanding, applying, creating, evaluating, analyzing. So, why is rigor important? There is a substantial link between challenge and intrinsic motivation. We know that when our students are intrinsically motivated, they want to learn, they're taking responsibility for their learning, and they're easy to teach when they want to, follow through with the learning. It's much more difficult with a student who isn't interested, that doesn't want to do it. So increasing that, intrinsic motivation is really important, and challenge is linked to that. Rigorous instruction fosters strategic and flexible thinking, and students are actively involved in their learning and develop higher level thinking skills. So we go to that next step. Do's and don'ts of rigor. So the do's are to ask thought-provoking questions. Why do you feel that way? How does that connect to a previous experience you had? Instead of, do you like it or do you not? Any kind of yes or no question is definitely not rigorous. Designing lessons that have multiple steps. So instead of saying, this is what we're doing, and then we're gonna stop and leave it and not explore more, really have the kids work on something that they can carry across subjects, kind of discover different levels of depth for their learning. Of course, not have students only use worksheets. I think that we all know that. Evoke formative feedback through sharing. So having those conversations among each other where they talk about what the learning means to them and what is their interpretation and how they can apply it in other facets, rather than just having students work in isolation all the time. Require students to speak and write using academic language to explain their learning. So a lot of times in third grade, I'll say, what do we call this number? We'll be talking about fractions. What do we call this number? The top number. No, it's not the top number, it's the numerator. So rigorous instruction is constantly reiterating those academic language terms and having them apply them and use them in the classroom is important and rigorous as well. Accepting speech like stuff and things is a no. We're not going to do that. Ensuring that students provide evidence of their learning. So they can come up with an answer, but if they can't tell you why that is the answer that they chose, we need to dig a little deeper and kind of evoke that conversation and reasoning justification for why that is. All right, so here is an example of rigor. Rather than having a student copy a definition or even write the definition in their own words, students can create a riddle about the vocabulary words. So here's an example. I am part of the water cycle. I am the reason that puddles disappear. I am water droplets going back into the air. What am I? So the word was evaporation. So instead of saying evaporation is when, it's part of the water cycle, so on and so forth, they kind of create clues. And we did an activity like that in here the other day that was very thought-provoking. The kids at first were like, I can't do this. And we talked about think time and questions and answers and steps. We talked about sequencing, and by the end of it, they were coming up with some really great examples. So that was exciting. So this is just a really nice visual. I have it as a handout for you in the back when you're walking out. This is just kind of some important pieces of rigor. I'll just let you look through those. A lot of them we've talked about: citing evidence, expanding vocabulary, writing. Anytime that we can have them put their learning into writing, it really helps kind of raise that level, increase rigor. Okay, so right now I'm going to pass out the handout. I would like you to look through the list of strategies, take a few minutes, reflect on what you do in the classroom, and then you're going to place a check mark next to either procedures that you've done in the past or anything that's working for you right now. You're going to place a star next to something that you see that you don't do, but that might be a good something for you to get implemented in the classroom. And then we're going to have a table discussion and discuss the strategies that you're using and why they're effective. Because we know we don't ever get enough time to really talk about what's working in our classrooms together. So I thought that was really super important.